I'm Thor Gunderson, and welcome to Just Asking for a Friend. The program, as you know by now, where we go into the community collecting, and we meet content creators, collectors, sculptors, people from the industry, all walks of life in the community. And tonight, we got a man from the old school style of collecting, and this man deep into the books and comic book lore, and I believe he even used to own a comic book shop. So he's been collecting for a very long time. One of the founders of Collective Minds, we have Mr. Jerry Bourne. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for the invite, Thor.
You're welcome, man. It's a pleasure. How you been doing?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. Treading water. Trying to navigate the statue world and everything. And,
and it's changing. It's very dynamic, isn't it?
Yeah, we gotta get into that because it's changed a lot, especially even in the time when I began. I don't know how long you've been collecting, really. Statues per se, but it's changed even in the short time I've been collecting. You know what I mean? So,
well, I've had a weird journey. Well, I guess if you want to, whenever you're ready to get into that part of it, but I've had a very interrupted journey in my collecting life.
Right. Okay.
So yeah.
Well, we'll get to that in a second.
I'm relatively new to the.
Okay. Yeah, I was wondering. I didn't know exactly how long you've been, statue collecting per se.
To the community, I'm a relatively new.
The community.
Yeah.
But what I like to do is I like to start with where you from, where you grew up, and like how you got into pop culture and everything.
Sure. I'm from Eastern Connecticut, is where I was born and raised for my first 16 years. It's colonial New England kind of thing. So it was very agrarian, farm-based, way back, way before me when it was settled. The area was settled in the 1600s and some of it in the 1700s. So there's a lot of history there. The area that I'm from is right on we call it the Thames River. It was named after the Thames in London, but it's pronounced up there. It's pronounced Thames, and I'm right between the two larger cities, Norwich and New London. Norwich is up the river, and New London is coastal. And I grew up in a little tiny sleepy town called Uncasville, which nobody had ever heard of.
Yeah, I never heard that.
Well, but now. The Mohegan Indian tribe owned the property and built Mohegan Sun and Foxwoods there. So right in my town are casinos that are really a big deal. But that was way after I left. And so I grew up there and, my dad mostly was the breadwinner. My mom was mostly stay at home. She did some odd jobs and things like that, but it was mostly what a lot of people think of as the traditional kind of family. I was the oldest, and then I had a brother and sister, and I'm about a generation ahead of most of you guys. So I'm probably 10 years older than you, Thor. And so I grew up at a little bit of a different time. I was 13 when Star Wars came out.
Okay. Yeah, I was 2. So
yeah. Okay. So, right. So about 11 years older.
Yeah.
But we had a very modest living. We lived in this little tiny, tiny by what I think today's standards is a 2-bedroom, one bathroom house. In the footprint, I can't, my recollection of it was very small. And being a child, you always think everything's bigger. And I would guess it was about a 1,000 square foot house.
Okay.
So 3 kids and 2 parents in a 2-bedroom house. That's where I originally came from. And our vacations, so we were in Connecticut, probably a 2.5-hour drive to New York City. Mm-hmm. I went to New York. I was in New York City twice in my childhood. So we never went there. We didn't. That wasn't in the cards. vacations in the summertime, we didn't go on vacation. I hear people talk about vacations and family, taking families to Disney and things.
I ain't never been to Disneyland.
we didn't have those resources. I mean, even there was skiing in Vermont. We never went skiing. We went sledding out back on the hills, and the big vacation in the summer was driving to Maine to visit my paternal grandmother. And that was really where I kind of got my introduction to comic books, because we would stop at the drugstore before we headed out of town, and we would give a couple of dollars, and we would each get to go and grab some comic books. Of course, at that time, for a couple of dollars, you could get eight comic books or so. And so my brother would grab some, I would grab some, my sister would grab some. My brother is about 4 years younger than me, so I would try to influence him into the titles he picked, so that I would have, basically 16 comics to read on the trip to Maine. The trip to Maine was about a 6-hour drive in the family station wagon, and that was our entertainment. That was it. That you had to keep yourself busy, and if you weren't looking at license tags or trying to find blue Volkswagens was kind of a game that we played, and so you read comic books in the back of the car, and that was how I got started. I hung on to them all, but I read the heck out of them. They all the spines were all torn up, and I had read the stories over and over and over again.
Me too.
I had maybe 100 comic books or so, and when I was before I got to the point where I was out doing jobs and making money. I used to cut my grandmother's lawn. Would be my source of income when I was growing up. But then my father got an offer to move to South Florida. My father was a telephone man. My father, or he is. My father's still alive. He's retired now, but his career, he was a telephone man. He worked for Southern New England Telephone Company, which was in the Bell system, part of the giant AT&T conglomerate. And he got an offer to relocate to Hollywood, Florida. Actually, he was going to be working in Miami-Dade, but we were looking at Hollywood, Florida area to move. So that's what we did. Uprooted at 16, and the whole family moved to Florida, and that was a big change. I
was about to ask you, how did that affect you moving?
Well, it kind of sucked, because the people that I was in high school with, some of them were people I went through kindergarten with.
Wow.
So that was a big deal, and it was a small high school anyway, but it fed in from other schools. But I still had, that core group of kids that I went through when I was in kindergarten were still all around. So that was a big deal. That was kind of tough, but it was a new adventure thing too. And it was, I perceived it as a big raise for my dad. We were able to buy a bigger house. We bought a house in Hollywood, Florida, and we each got our own bedroom. So that's kind of how they sold it to us. Right. We're going from this little tiny house. Well, actually, my brother and I, in the later part in the Connecticut house, my brother and I lived in the basement so that there could be some more room. That my father finished part of the basement, and my brother and I lived down there in the basement basically we had a divider between the two of us in about probably a 10 by 10 room or 12 by 10 room.
Wow.
So the big sale to get us to go to Florida was, hey, you're going to get your own room. And so I was like, well, all right. I didn't have much choice, but I figured I might as well take what I could get.
Right.
So we went to Florida. I got a room, and I got a whole bunch of freedom. We were in an area that was not, in Connecticut, the closest drugstore we could get to by walking, but they didn't have the best comic book selection, and you really had to get in the car to go in to get any of the good comics. But once I got to South Florida, there was a shop that sold books, but he had bins of comic books. He had back issues. And
I love those.
I could get there on my bicycle at 16. I didn't have a car yet, but I was working on it. And I started working at the Burger King that was also Bikes Right Away. So I started to have a little bit of disposable income, and that was right around the time Death of Jean Grey in Marvel Comics.
Oh, okay.
And he had back issues of X-Men, and so I started buying back issues, and I kind of got going. But then, life happens, and you get busy with work, and so and start to make friends and figure things out. And so comic books weren't so important. And high school became real important, and that occupied my time. So there was there's one of those breaks where I had the travel comic books to keep me busy. Then I had started collecting in the late 70, early 80 period, and then stopped again. And then it graduated high school. It was time to figure out what to do, and I had no idea what the heck I wanted to do. Neither of my parents were college grads.
Okay.
So college wasn't sort of really thrust upon me. They didn't. They thought, okay, do whatever you want. Do what you figure out your own way. So I thought I knew all I needed to know. I went to work at a movie theater. Actually, I was working at a movie theater for the second release, the re-release of Empire Strikes Back.
Okay.
And that was about 82 or 83, I think.
Okay.
So Star Wars was kind of a theme through my life. 77 when it came out, it was a sensation.
Right.
And I remember that whole summer because I couldn't go right away, but everybody was going, and I had to wait for the craziness to die down. And I went I went sometime that summer, but it was probably late in the summer when I got to go.
Okay.
But they were playing that Cantina song over and over again on the radio.
Real on the radio?
Oh yeah, it was.
Wow.
It was in the top. It was probably top 10.
That's crazy.
Yeah, if you go back and look at Billboard top 10 in 77, there's a couple songs that stick in my head from that summer, and that Cantina song was one of them. And ELO, Telephone Line, was one, and another one was Andy Gibb, Puppet on a String. They played these things over and over. That we had very little selection back then. Right. We had a television that had 13 channels, and maybe 3 of them had reception.
I'm about to say you had more channels than me because I had about 4 channels.
No, I mean it had 13 channels it had 13 on the dial, on the UHF dial.
Oh, right, yeah.
We only got 3. Yeah, 3 channels. And then for radio, the local station was an AM station, and it was stars kind of had to line for you to pick up the FM station that was the rock and roll station. So we're always trying to play that at the right times of day when it would come in, but most of the time we had to listen to whatever was in the pop cycle.
Right. Wow, so, that's news to me because I saw Empire first, because I was 2 when, so I didn't see New Hope in the movies. Mm-hmm. So I didn't know they was playing the Cantina song on the radio and everything.
Yeah. They had a I think it was like a Cantina melody, but the Cantina song was the main part of it.
Right.
That's that crazy. Was top 10. I mean, it was just in a loop. So yeah. I'll try not to get too bogged down in my entire journey because I could probably spend the whole hour telling you where my story took me. But back to Florida, I didn't know what I was going to do. I started doing jobs. I worked at the movie theater, which was a big deal for me. And then I saw that was going nowhere. I was just working in a movie theater, dumb kid, 18 years old. Partying with friends, and we knew the projectionist, so the movie theater closed at midnight, and we would put whatever film we had and eat all the popcorn from the concession stand and partake in our illicit substances and sit there and watch a movie
That's how it's done.
till 2:00.
Yeah.
But you realize you're not going anywhere fast doing that. So I started looking around for other things. I went to work in auto parts, and I was kind of a car nut. I got the family station wagon when I was when we moved to Florida about a year after we had been there, and my dad said, here's the station wagon, figure it out, keep it on the road. If you're going to drive this thing, you're going to keep it on the road. I don't have time to fix it for you, do whatever. So I just started wrenching on it. The starter went bad probably the first month I had it, first 2 months that I had it, and had to replace the starter. And so I got interested in cars. I went to work in auto parts. I did that for a while, and we delivered auto parts. So I was on the delivery team for the beginning, and we delivered parts to another parts store, and right next door to that was a comic book store.
There you go.
And these guys were serious. They were two young guys, Tropic Comics, John Krasinski and Rob Prince. And they were, very extremely knowledgeable, and they were buying collections. They did it the way that you probably want to see a comic book store if you're the purist. Everything. They didn't blow out comics in dollar bins, and back then they were quarter bins, but they had everything categorized. The store was always in nice shape. They kept, everything was alphabetical, and their knowledge was just it was just superb, because it had to be. Back then there was no Google, there was no internet you could go to, and you have to, if you're a good business person, you're going to try to connect with all your customers. So if somebody is an Archie customer, you gotta deal with that you gotta be able to talk to that person. If Swamp Thing is their character, you gotta talk to them. If Batman or Superman or Spider-Man, you gotta be well versed on everything. And these guys were really sharp at it, and they were young too. They were, in fact, John is younger than I am at this time, and they're running their own thing. So it was like, wow, these guys really got it going on. I would love to do something like this. And so I started buying collections, and I built up quite a sizable collection from buying other collectors' stuff. And my dad was in a position with his retirement account where he had some resources, and he said, well, let's do something with this. And so I started to explain to him how it worked in buying collections. At the time, kind of the going price, when the offer that you made to people when you're buying a collection was about 10 cents a book. And, then you pick out the stuff that's really good. The other stuff is the runs that you try to work and sell. And I said, well, look, here's how this whole works. And he said, all right, well, let's do it. Let's open a store.
Wow.
And, but we did it on a shoestring. So he fronted the money to get the deposits on the store, to get the store set up, to set up, to get the account with Diamond Comics. Diamond was the retailer for new comics at that time. I think
they still are.
They probably are. I lost track of everything. There were a couple that popped up. Capital City was one that came along while my store was open, and some of my friends in the business were trying Capital City. I stuck with Diamond because Diamond I was in Miramar at the time, was where we set the store up, which is right between Fort Lauderdale and Miami. And Diamond had a distribution center in Tampa. So they were, at that time, the quickest to getting the comics. New Comics Day for me was, I think it was Thursday, when the books would come in UPS. The New York stores and the stores that were right near distribution centers were getting them Wednesday, but New Comic Day for us was Thursday. So I opened a store. I had no experience of what I was doing. I was young, and a lot of my friends were just kind of coming into disposable income. But we opened the store on very tight finances. So, many weeks I would go without I still lived at home. Many weeks I would go without disposable money. I was, my friends are all going out at night and seeing movies and drinking and all that other good stuff. And I was like, well, I don't have any money, and I didn't want to feel like I was imposing on them, getting them to buy for me. So, so my store stayed open for probably 3 years or so. So it was through the probably mid 80s to the late 80s. And then it was more just a thing of, it wasn't generating enough income. And so I decided to go out and get a new trade. And my new trade was t-shirt printing. And I went to work for a friend of mine that had worked for large scale industrial t-shirt printing company. And that's what I did. And so started doing t-shirt printing, and then did that for a couple of years for a couple different people. And a couple of friends of mine said, "Oh, let's open our own t-shirt factory." So the entrepreneurial thing has always kind of flowed through me. But a comedy of errors. It was a bad time, late 80s, early 90s. We're talking about now, t-shirt printing.
Okay.
Where a lot of U.S. manufacturing jobs were going offshore, and t-shirts were one of them. We used to be able to buy made in the U.S. t-shirts. You'd be challenged now to find a shirt that they're still printing them in the U.S., but most of all manufacturers offshore, and even a lot of the printing now is offshore. So we had a couple really big customers. Do you remember the retailer named Zehrs?
I do. I remember going to. It used to be a Zehrs right up the street from me.
Okay, so it's like a Walmart for the folks watching, or a Kmart. It was a big retailer, and one of our customers had an account. Zehrs was servicing Zehrs, so doing large volumes of stuff, and we were doing what's called contract printing, where we didn't own the shirt. We did the printing for him, who then sold it to Zehrs. So you got to do big numbers, and screw ups cost a lot of money. And so we had a big screw up because one of our first really big jobs, 500 dozen, so 6,000 shirts. We did 6,000 shirts of Bart Simpson, and I didn't know who the hell Bart Simpson was. Simpsons was still on the Tracy Ullman show, or maybe just breaking into Fox.
Right.
And we got the separations. And so when you screen print, you have a different screen for each color that you're going to lay down. And so the colors were, and then usually for colors, they give a Pantone matching system number, but here they just had, they had a couple of PMS numbers on it, but the flesh tone screen just said flesh on it. And so I had never seen Bart Simpson before. We had no idea he was yellow.
I see. Yeah. I got you.
So we threw Caucasian flesh ink in the screen.
Oh my God.
And we printed 6,000 shirts.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And the shirts cost about $3 a piece, and you get paid 25 cents per print. So you have to print 12 times. You have to print 12 shirts to make up for one screw up. We had 6,000 screw ups. We printed this entire run. And we didn't know any better, so we packed it all up, shipped it. Our guy calls us up, and he's screaming bloody murder. What the hell have you guys done? I'm like, what? What do we do? And he says they're yellow. The Simpsons are yellow. And we were like, oh, I don't know. We didn't know.
Y'all wrote flesh on here.
Yeah. So we all start panicking now. How the hell are we going to pay for 6,000 shirts? That's $18,000 screw up. So he says, well, we shipped it. It went to the retailer. Let's see what happens if they sell. You guys are off the hook if we could sell them. But if you don't sell them, we're going to have to figure out how to settle this up. And so they put them on the shelves, and they were local stores in the Miami area, and they sold them all. They sold out completely.
Wow.
In the first week. they reordered the misprint from us. They said,
crazy.
make us another batch, because the boutiques think that these colors match really well with they were like selling denim stuff or something.
Yeah,
I don't know how they were putting the whole thing together, but they sold them all out and they ordered another run of the misprint. And then they sold that out. Now they had to stop because the licensor told them, no, you're not following the character. You can't print these guys in Caucasian flesh tone. They're yellow. So anyway, it saved our butt, and we actually came out okay from that.
That's good.
But that's one of the that's the problem with not knowing what the hell you're doing. But then back on what happened with the t-shirt printing company, most of the work went offshore, and when we were doing Simpsons, we were running 3 shifts, 24 hours. I had 30 employees. It was a pretty big operation, at least in my eyes. Mm-hmm. But the work started to dry up. The work, offshore work was going on, and keeping that kind of machine running, you're always hoping that more work is going to come in. So you don't want to get rid of your skilled employees. And so me and my partners, we started taking out of our own personal finances to keep the whole thing running. And we did that we probably lasted for about a year. And we finally got to the point where it's like, okay, we can't lose any more money in this. We're going to have to close up shop and figure out what's next. And so that's what we did. We shut down in early 90s, and off to a new industry I was. And I was pretty good at fixing cars, and so I had some mechanical skills. And so one of the really large companies that did service for screen printing equipment hired me on as a person. It was a really small service company. When I got hired on, there were 2 technicians that would go out and do the jobs all over the place. And they were the 2 owners, and there was me kind of running their office, and then they had 1 guy that worked in the shop on equipment. So, I replaced one of the owner's brothers, who was kind of a screw up, and I was sitting. So I was doing their bookkeeping for them and answering phones, and their bookkeeping wasn't all that complicated. When I got in there, the brother had a bunch of past due bills. He wasn't paying the bills, but they had the capital, they had the income to pay everything. So I just made it my mission for probably the first month to get everything caught up, to get everything current, and to build a system so that the bills were taken care of as they came in, and that the invoicing was taken care of as it came in. And I kind of streamlined everything to the point where Monday morning I would come in at 8:00. I could have the entire week's work done, the paperwork done by noon, and the rest of the time I just sat there answering calls for them in their office. And so I started playing video games on their computer to fill the time, and I played Castle Wolfenstein.
I remember that game.
Yeah.
And Doom, all that stuff
Doom.
came out at the same
It was
time.
the Doom kind of engine, but
I
I played the Castle Wolfenstein that was the only game that I dared load on their computer, but I had that on there, and I would just play that. And after a couple of months, I said, okay, let me figure out something productive. So I made a parts catalog for the company, and then bought a mailing list. Still no internet, right? We're still pre-internet days. And so I started mailing every screen printer that had more than 5 employees and all across the country. And the parts blew up, because when their machine goes down, they're dead in the water. And they're desperate to get that machine running. They would pay our guys to fly into their city, spend the night, work on the machines, and then fly back out, and they pay all the expenses and all that stuff. But we had so much work, we couldn't even cover. We did North America and South America, and we couldn't cover all the customers. So I started selling parts and then coaching them over the phone how to repair machines. And that became a really big deal for the business. They started making a whole lot of money on parts. And so I went to them and said, hey, look, I created this part of your business that you never had before. You guys need to cut me in. And one of the owners said, yeah, that's not going to happen. We're not cutting you in. Why should we cut you in? You're not going anywhere, and you can't do this without us. So that really got me bent out of shape. And I said, that's it. My wife, I was married I had married between the t-shirt printing and starting working for these guys, the repair. I got married. And my wife had a really good job. She had gone through college and got her master's, and sorry, my screen just disappeared. So we could live off of just her income. And so we talked about it and said, all right, next time something opens in a college town, I'll go get a degree in something or other. So we can, and then, I'll get the degree. We'll go down to one income. And then once I've got the degree, I'll go out and get a job. And our daughter was just born at this time, and figured she wanted to be stay-at-home mom kind of thing and raise the daughter. So that's what we did. Off to positioned open in Gainesville, Florida, at the University of Florida. At the Department of Veteran Affairs in Gainesville. That's what my wife did for her career. And University of Florida was right there. So I figured, all right, this is perfect. We'll go to Gainesville. I'll start at University of Florida, and I'll get a degree in something or other. I still didn't know what I wanted to do. And so we packed everything up. We moved to Birmingham, Alabama for 3 months because she had to go through some special training for the new job. And then we were off to Gainesville, Florida. All this time, collecting's on hold, not doing anything.
Yeah, I was about to ask you. I was like, I can't wait to hear your weird way you got into collecting.
Well, I had the whole comic book thing, but I put all that on hold after I closed.
Getting the weird journey to statue collecting.
Yeah. So I'm close. I'm finally. It happened. All started in Gainesville. So we get to Gainesville. I enroll in University of Florida as an undergraduate, and start working on an engineering degree. Mm-hmm. And this was about the time of the end of the 90s, beginning of 2000s.
Okay.
And I got interested in action figures. I started seeing action figures. I was like, I can't, comics, they're too expensive. I don't want to put the resources into comics. So I started collecting action figures. I got into the Toy Biz animated series line for like Spider-Man and X-Men, and they did they had Fantastic Four, they had Iron Man. And that kind of drew me in because it was all classic stuff. They were the comics, the animated series were very much based on the classic comic stories. So I started buying all that stuff up, and it was cheap. You could get these figures. You get them at Walmart on clearance for next to nothing. I think retail on them were like $6 retail or something like that. So I started collecting those, and then I kind of expanded out into the Toy Biz had this famous covers set that they were about 1/8 scale, and they had cloth uniforms, suits. They were a lot like the old Migos from which I had when I was a kid, and so I started getting those, and then I started customizing them, and Bowen statues were about the same scale as at least the heads were almost perfect in scale for the Toy Biz famous covers line. So I thought, and the head sculpts were pretty awful on Toy Biz, and so I started buying Bowen busts and recasting. Don't know the terrible word then I started recasting Bowen heads. Actually, some of them originally I just started cutting up the Bowen busts and using them, and then I kind of thought, why the heck am I gonna ruin this bust? I'll just figure out how to recast it. And so I found Smooth On, which is a company that makes casting supplies. They sell RTV silicone for making the molds, and then they sell the urethane for casting the positive. So I started recasting these things, and so I did a Spider-Man with a bow and head, and just took the Toy Biz and chopped the head off it, and glued the bow and head to it, and painted it up, and I redid the hands because the Toy Biz one was, the whole thing was cloth, so it just looked like he had mittens on, and his head was this kind of like sock looking. So I cut all that off. I kind of learned how to sew up a little bit, and I did a bunch of customizing of these famous covers, and I started collecting Bowen busts. And I have the collecting bug. You start getting something, and you gotta get the next one. I gotta get the next one. I gotta get I gotta have this. So I had this. I still have this huge Bowen bust collection. It's all packaged up. I don't have it out anymore. But the next progression from Bowen busts is Bowen statues.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is around 2000, early 2000s. I bought Daredevil. And they're all museum statues at this time. I bought Daredevil, I bought Thor, I bought Cap, I bought Iron Man, and I think I might have bought Spider-Man. At the time, Bowen statues were less than $200. They were, this was retail. You could get Bowens for, I think, for example, Iron Man was like $169 was retail price.
Okay.
But I quickly, and I was like, oh my God, I can't believe I'm spending $200.
Right. That's the part you got to get over.
Well, plus my wife's paying all the bills. I'm supposed to be on this mission to get through college.
Right.
And I start getting distracted with this stuff. And I said, I can't keep this up. I can't get into these. So I put the brakes on there, and I sold all of the Bowen statues that I had bought. I had 5 of them. And so I sold all those. I said, I'm just not in a position now where I can keep this up.
Right.
And I went through graduate school at University of Florida. I had no idea, by the way, if any of you out there thinking about graduate school, if you do it right, you don't pay for graduate school. You get paid to go to graduate school, at least in disciplines that have funding for science and engineering. And I had no idea. I paid for my undergrad. We're paying our bills to live, plus we're paying my tuition. Well, the department came to me and said, hey, look, we've got this fellowship offer where we will give you a stipend, a salary, plus we'll pay your tuition if you stay for grad school. And I was like, well,
yeah,
come again? Come again? It wasn't a lot of money. It was
better than nothing.
It was way better than the undergraduate deal.
Right.
Now I'm getting paid something,
right.
Plus I'm working on a higher degree. So I said, all right, sign me up. We were happy there in Gainesville. My daughter was already in the school system. We didn't want to pull her out. She was in elementary school. So it made sense. So we stayed, and I went through University of Florida, and I ended up getting my PhD in material science and engineering. And then we started looking where we're going to move. We started looking at different places around, and I developed a skill set while I was at University of Florida that I knew how to run a couple of instruments that no one else on campus knew how to run. It was part of my PhD work. And so they offered to hire me on as a research scientist. And again, so we could stay in Gainesville. We didn't have to move. Now I was going to get some more money. And so we took the deal again. We said, all right, well, give me the job. And one of the faculty members quit the first week I was hired in August. And the department head came to me and said, oh, by the way, we need you to teach this class. And they gave me a class to teach. And I agreed for no extra money to teach the class, which was probably naive at the time. But and that was kind of where I found my passion in my career. I was doing a lot of research and characterization work at the time, but then I found that in the classroom, I really kind of made the connections. And so I cultivated that, and I became a faculty member at University of Florida. And I was there for 5 years. Position opened up in Colorado at a place that was sort of the mecca for my field, and so I took that position. And my wife stayed in Gainesville, so now we're living. My wife lives in Gainesville, Florida. I live in Golden, Colorado, and it would look like it was going to last 7 years because she wanted to retire in her position in Gainesville. So we're going to live in these two different cities, 1,800 miles apart. a 3-day drive across the United States, and we did it. And so now I'm living the bachelor
For
life.
7 years?
7 years. 7 years.
Wow.
7 years we lived separate, and this is where the collecting finally comes back in.
Wow.
So this was 2011. I moved out here. Okay. Somewhere around 2016 or 2017, I find Sideshow Collectibles. And that's where the floodgates open. It was like late 2017, maybe early 2018 that I finally pulled the trigger on something. I was looking at stuff, but I wasn't, and I didn't know anything about Facebook groups or anything that was going on. I knew Statue Forum existed, but I really didn't, I didn't post a lot on there. In fact, my old account is still active, which was an account name, an online name I used to use back in the late 90s, early 2000s. I bought Thanos on Throne, and I didn't get it.
Wow, that was the first piece.
That was my first piece. So
that's a whopper. Well, that's deep into the pool stuff right away.
When you leave something for a long time, and you look back at the things that were popular when you left, I was like, I couldn't believe, because I was a big Thanos fan. This is back in the Jim Starlin days in comic books, and I had the entire run of Adam Warlock. Which was all through the Marvel. It went from Fantastic Four to Thor to there was some Hulk issues. It was in Strange Tales, and then he got his own book, and then he went back to Strange Tales, I think. And there was this whole convoluted, weird story. And Thanos was kind of his big opposition through a lot of it when Jim Starlin took over. They both died. Spoiler alert. They both died about 1977, 78 in Marvel Comics. So I came back into the statue collecting, and I saw this Thanos on Throne, and I thought, wow, I like Thanos, but I can't believe anybody else likes him enough for them. I knew nothing about the MCU. I didn't know that they had. I didn't know anything about the whole Ron Lim's run in comic books with the Silver Surfer and the Infinity Gauntlet stuff. I didn't know anything about all that. I didn't realize they brought him back to life.
So let me stop it right here, because a lot of times we mess with Jerry, and when he says anything after 1990, he don't have a clue about that stuff.
Right.
And you didn't watch the X-Men animated series. You weren't a fan of that.
I didn't even know it existed.
Right, because most of our crew, that's how they became.
Right, you guys all grew up on that kind of stuff. Right.
So, but
I knew it existed because I was collecting the toys from Toy Biz, but I was reflecting back to the comics because where the stories were based. Right. I never went back and watched the animated series. I never watched the Batman animated series. All that came after.
That was fantastic. That even holds up today, in my opinion.
In my day, Scooby-Doo was a big deal.
I remember Scooby.
I watched the Marvel Superheroes Hour, which was they would take stills from the comic books and animate the mouths or animate.
Oh, yeah.
It was late 60s, but that was the television thing was the problem. I couldn't get the channels that was played on.
I think Critical Mass was just talking about that.
Yeah. So him and I are the same age. And that was, that I loved it, but it couldn't ever, I knew the Spider-Man song. Actually, my grandfather recorded that for me on his reel-to-reel tape deck. Pre-cassette tapes, he had this reel-to-reel tape deck that he used to record things and, record the family and different things. But yeah, so I was like, Thanos on Throne. Oh my gosh, look at this! And the sculpt was fantastic. I couldn't believe it. But then I saw the price tag, and I was like, and it was after the thing had sold out on Sideshow like in a few hours. So I was looking at eBay. I didn't know any other way of getting it. So I'm looking at eBay and I'm waffling back and forth. Should I spend this kind of money? Can I really throw this kind of money?
And I'm sure they done pumped the price up on eBay.
It was well over retail price.
Yeah.
But I finally worked it out in my head and convinced myself to buy it, and that's what opened up the floodgate. I bought that, and then I started looking around. And somehow I found Facebook. I found, I found Vince Vell. And when I was watching his customizing videos, I kind of had that interest from back when I was customizing action figures. And I found Rad Titan, and I would watch those guys, and I was kind of like, wow, these guys are kind of irreverent. This is interesting. And then I started watching George on MCE, and he had a weekly show. And so I kind of watched that, and I was a little bit interested in watching one. Then I found you guys.
That's when insanity began.
and I was like, holy crap! I found my thing to do on Friday nights.
Oh man!
So every Friday night, I'd get home from work, do whatever, get my dinner. I think you guys came on at 9 o'clock.
Eastern, yeah.
So 9 o'clock Eastern, so that's 7 o'clock my time. So I get home from work, get some dinner, get whatever, get settled, sit down, open it up, and then just watch you guys. And I would watch, you used to do these shows. I used to hope for the shows to last, because sometimes you would be on, I would look at the clock and it'd be midnight my time. I'm like, these maniacs are still on.
It was crazy.
2 o'clock in the morning.
They didn't want it to end. They was like, "Would you go do after hours?" I was like, "Dude, I gotta go to sleep." They was no after hour. I was like, Jesus God.
Well, so I would, I used to hate when it ended.
Yeah.
But I think the shows they were regularly like 3 hours. You would always, it seemed like you would always go at least 3 hours. And then sometimes they, it's hard. You start to remember things differently, but I can remember just sitting there and, Tim with his commentary on stuff, and Ryan was just like the uber troll, the ultimate troll. He would just decimate people. And
I don't know how he became the life coach. I just started calling him life coach.
But he could also take it too. He had his little corner, and the whole thing about what his wife allowed him. That was kind of the running joke. That was funny. Yeah. And Jason was crazy when he would come on, and then Archangel's in the chat doing all of his, saying
with Franco.
Any kind of crazy shit that he could do to get a laugh. And I'm cracking up reading the stuff, interacting with him in the chat and watching you guys. And I'm like, wow, this really transcends the statues. There's the common interest is the statues, but then just the irreverence of the whole thing, and you could see the friendship there that didn't seem to exist. I mean, no doubt about it, George and Alex are lifelong friends, but you guys were just the dynamic that was going on. Barb would come in, Ohami would come in, and it was. I wouldn't watch any TV. I would just sit there and watch you guys. That was my entertainment for Friday night, and I was like hooked. I was these guys are just off the chain. This is awesome. And then Ark started popping on. Sometimes you would have him on, and he was crazy. PJ and the whole armpit thing was the armpit hair thing was just like these guys.
Ryan Gosling.
The Ryan Gosling. That was classic. That was a little bit later, but that was classic.
That was later. You were on that show.
I was on that show.
You were on there. Yeah.
Carolina Hitman. Yeah, that guy was such a character. It's too bad he kind of showed up and then disappeared so quickly.
Yeah, he's working. He can't really come on.
He was hilarious.
It wasn't it? Him and his boy.
What was the guy's name? Anubis. Yeah. That was just I don't know. I don't even remember how it was that I ended up getting on DCX.
I think Barb somehow Barb told us Jerry, I see he's in the chat. Yeah, he wants to come on. Like, okay, yeah, sure, bring him on. And and that was it.
Yeah. That was and then when you guys asked me, I was like, oh, I'm not worthy to go on with these guys. These guys are freaking off the chain. Hilarious. But it just clicked. The whole banter between me and Greg really worked. So me and Greg fighting back and forth about picking on each other all the time, and so that was a ton of fun. I like Halloween. I don't do cosplay like at shows or anything like that, but Halloween I'll always kind of do something, and so that was something I figured I would add to the show, and I did that. I did the one where I dressed up as David.
Jared. That was classic, man. That was hilarious.
Yeah, that was a ton of fun because it was the week before Halloween, and I was like, man, I can punk this guy David. Yeah, and he's such a character.
Yeah, he is.
So
he is.
I was like, all right, I'll get the glasses, I'll get the head. He always wore a headset. I'll get the headset. Yeah. I'll dye my beard black, and then I did the green screen with his background.
Yeah.
And that was a blast. That show was funny. And then I followed the next one up with the Maestro Hulk.
I remember that one too. Yeah,
that was a lot of fun. That was a great time when I had a ton of fun when I was on DCX. And
oh man, I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah, that was and the whole time I've been addicted to statues. I don't. I always had the collecting bug. Always collected something. Collected coins when I was young. I collected, and just from rifling through change and stuff like that. I collected comic books. Did the action figure thing, and then now statues. But statues has got a hold of me like nothing has ever had a hold of me before.
Well, that's a good say. We got about 10 minutes left, and talk about how it's changed since when you began to now.
Well, COVID was, I think, there was a couple of things that happened that changed really the dynamic in statue collecting. It's interesting to me also that a lot of the collectors have a couple of good years and then disappear. And this even happened before COVID. Cartel from Hell, Make by Marvel. These guys were YouTubers who had really neat channels, and I would watch them all the time. And then they kind of disappeared. Mac Collections.
Mac, yeah.
So I don't think it's all that new or recent phenomenon, but it seems like there's some burnout that happens.
Yeah.
And then with COVID, we were all on lockdown. We were all looking. I was already into the statue things. So statue things were a pastime that I could do without having to go out, and I could stream and do whatever. But I think a lot more people came into it because they were looking for something to do. They had disposable cash because now there were nobody's taking vacations. Nobody's going out to dinner, spending money, got all this extra cash. So there's this big influx of disposable cash to spend on things. Everybody had to learn how to do Zoom, and we all use StreamYard for streaming because it's so convenient. But the world figured out how to get in front of a camera and not be intimidated by the camera. And so a lot of people popped up with doing their own thing and popping up as new statue collectors. I'm going to sound like the curmudgeon, the crusty old fart here, but I'm going to say it anyway. I think that there's a loss of respect for experiential learning. And I think the boomers, my generation, Gen X, yours, have a real strong appreciation for experiential learning because that's how you had to learn stuff. You had to go through it. There wasn't YouTube where you could just go pull up a YouTube video and figure out how to do something, or just go to Google and get information. Now nobody remembers stuff anymore about comic books or even statues. And there's a few people, I should say nobody. There's a few people that take note of it, but everything's at your fingertips. You can Google anything. So it makes, it kind of makes sense not to spend a lot of brain power memorizing this stuff. But then also you can fool yourself into thinking that you're an authority overnight without having been through any of it. You can think that, I can Google this and find out this first appearance or find out who this sculptor is. I don't have to be, I don't have to have an eye for the sculptor. I can, I don't have to remember who it was when I bought it, why I liked it. I can find everything's at my fingertips. I can claim to be an authority just from banging up on Google or going to somebody's YouTube channel or a YouTube instructional thing and figure everything out. And so I think a lot of people fool themselves into knowing more than they actually know, especially the newer people. And I think I think there's some of that going on right now, and then also misrepresenting yourself. So the thing that drives me absolutely crazy is when somebody tries to come off as they're knowledgeable in something they really don't know what they're talking about. So last year or so, it used to really drive me nuts. I've it's part on my fault too. Why should I let this stuff bother me? They don't affect these don't. This doesn't affect me really. So I just try to back off and not watch as much content as I was watching.
Me too. Me too.
Through COVID, there are some more things to do. I need to get out a little bit more, and but I still got the bug. I cut way back on my customs. Me and Greg used to go with it. We used to be battling back and forth on DCX about who had custom POs.
They were funny, man.
I cut a lot of that out. I still have customs on PO, but I got myself under control.
Well, quick before we run out, what's your position on the edition size and value debate? As far as people upset at all these large edition sizes,
that's
variants and all that kind of stuff.
I mean, I don't want to bash people that really think that the edition size is what's driving them, but because in collecting anything, there is something to rarity. We're all kind of looking for. I don't show a lot of my collection at all. I try not to be a braggart about it, but sometimes, you get a little bit of a high from people thinking what you've got is cool. But as far as I'm concerned, I'm more into it for the 3-dimensional art than I am for the low edition size. Agreed. I buy stuff. If it's something that catches my eye, I have no care about what the edition size is. I'm not thinking that how am I gonna bail out of this and how am I gonna get my money back out of it and how am I gonna flip it? I don't do any of that I don't do any of that thought when I go into buying the statue. The only thing edition size does for me is lights a fire under me. If it's really low and I really want the piece, I'll PO it on day one kind of thing. But I'm not an edition size collector. But also, Ark is kind of my partner in crime now. It drives him crazy. The edition size people, it drives him absolutely bananas. But I kind of like, whatever. It's right. I'm not going to worry about it.
Well, a quick story that kind of reinforces what you were just talking about experience and knowledge. I remember when I went to go get this tattoo. I know you ain't down with Sons of Anarchy, but
with who? I'm not down.
I got this Sons of Anarchy tattoo. The day I went to go get it.
Yeah, we should have talked about that.
I know we should have, but anyway, this guy was getting a Batman tattoo on his chest, like over here. And so he was in the booth next to me, and it's like 10 people getting tattoos. And this guy's hollering and screaming because in the chest, I guess, is real painful. And then somehow Batman came up and he didn't know that Bruce Wayne was Batman. Everybody's gun turned off. Like everybody just stopped and looked at each other. He said, "Man, you getting a tattoo? You didn't know Bruce Wayne was Batman?" He said, "No, I didn't know that." And he was a young guy. And it was like, that just shows you, you think Batman's cool, but you don't take the time enough to find out anything, but you're getting tatted up. Everybody, and then you can just see everybody just shook their head and just start doing tattoos again. I was like, oh my God.
Yeah. I don't understand that, because if that character meant enough to me to get the tattoo, yeah. I mean, I would think it would mean enough to me to dig into the lore and find out, what is this character all about? What where'd it come from? Where'd he come from? What? That's quite.
That's crazy. That's a true story. I swear.
I try. It gets the best of me sometimes when people have lack of knowledge and then
me too.
kind of demonstrate how much lack of knowledge they have. I should let it. I should just let it go, but it does. It does get the better of me
Yeah.
sometimes.
I
Probably a
mean,
lot of times. Some people would
I
say.
need to stop because when I hear people talking about my guy and they don't know what they're talking about,
Yeah.
I'm like, no, just don't worry about it. Don't worry. You know what I mean? But
Yeah.
unfortunately, we done ran out of time. We might have to bring you back on for round 2, Jay.
Oh, sorry about that. You
No,
know,
no, that's
I
fine. That's fine.
I ramble on when I get going talking.
No, that's fine.
If the problem is you got an old guy that has a whole lot of different stuff that he's done.
Oh yeah, no, that's why we're here, to find out everything people didn't know, So,
Yeah.
but we probably gonna bring you back and do round 2 with Jerry. But thanks for coming on, man. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me, Thor. I really appreciate.
Oh, no problem. And we're gonna look forward to see you at the cookout.
All right, I will be there. I haven't bought my ticket yet, but I'll be there.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys later next time on Just Ask for a Friend, and we catch everybody later. Peace.